Okay, hi everyone. SmithyQ from SmithyQ.com. Welcome to part 2 of our opening survey. And I want to cover this particular setup in particular because it's increasingly popular, especially at amateur level, and you'll see it quite often in Blitz. There are people who will play this setup against absolutely everything that white does, and so it's useful to know a little bit about it. But also, and perhaps even more importantly, is that this is one of those openings where it seems as if black is just violating all the rules, every single opening principle, but he might be able to get away with it. Let me show you, first off, a common way of this can start here. That very often, black is going to be doing this plan of where he plays, okay, he's developing normal, but then he's not going to castle. At least not right away. He's going to play the c6 idea. He plays his queen on c7, and then he does this, if you've never seen it before, almost outlandish maneuver where he's got this knight f8 and then g5, knight to g6, and we can already see what black is trying to do. He's going to try and put this knight here on f4 where it's probing the king side. Maybe we got some h5 and g4. The rook could slide to any one of these. The files are going to open up, and there's some action. There's some pressure over here on the white king. And these positions can be rather difficult to play for white, or that is, it's as if white has done everything right. He's moved each piece once, he's got control of the center, he's castled, he's starting to gain space over here on the queen side. Black is doing none of those things, but in practice, especially in blitz games, black often has simply the easier plan. He's just going to throw everything at the white king, and white has to do, excuse me, a more nebulous strategy of expanding on the queen side and pressure and seeing what happens. Which is irritating, right? Because nothing feels worse than losing to what you feel are inferior moves, and this certainly feels like an inferior setup, but there's a lot of poison behind it. So let's back up. So this opening is typically reached, especially by modern players and by blitz players, through this d6 move order. And then we come here. In the olden days, knight f3, this would have been reached by something like this. This is called the Philidor. But it's the classic Philidor is a very different take than on that the whole lion setup we just saw. And the real problem, just in general, this opening was used by weaker players, usually players who don't know anything about theory and nothing at all, and they simply play d6 because they saw that their pawn was attacked. And so they defend their pawn. That's excellent, but now their bishop is stuck behind the pawns and they can't do anything, and black is simply cramped. And for years, this is kind of how people played the Philidor, is, let's see if I even remember my theory. Anyway, we reached a very similar position as, actually I think it's identical position. We reached the exact same position as what we just saw. However, black would usually play bishop e7, he would castle c6, right? And he's not going with this kingside attack, and he simply has less space. And if black plays like that, we're perfectly happy. Because, again, we can develop absolutely normally, black doesn't have any threats against us, he has no attack, and we can do anything. Absolutely anything. We can expand on the queen side, we can try and open the center, we can even attack him on the king side, absolutely anything, and black just sits there and defends. Again, if that was the worst case scenario, then you wouldn't need a video to explain how to fight the Philidor. The problem is, so to speak, is that by playing this new d6 setup, and then this whole attack on the king over here, it gives white some concrete problems to solve. So there's a couple things that we can do here. First off, if you're at all interested in this opening, I would highly recommend looking at the GM Simon Williams, the Ginger GM, where he talks about this. And one of the things that he notes is that white will often play h3 because he wants to play bishop e3 without being worried about knight g4. So, sorry, if we don't play h3 and we just play bishop e3, say, well then black can always harass the bishop with knight g4 and maybe get the pawns rolling this way as well, right? Maybe, who knows. And so white tries to stop that. The thing is, by playing h3 instead, this makes black's pawn assaults much faster and much more dangerous, because there's always that threat of g5 and then eventually g4, and things are going to open up. There's also potential sacrifices here, or the knight can come here and then sacrifice itself there. And so, as white, I would suggest not playing this h3 move. Or that is, you can give black a harder time to get his thematic attack by not developing the bishop to e3 and playing this h3. So we don't want to put the bishop on e3. We don't want to, give black this option. We also don't want to put the bishop on g5, because that just encourages black to throw his pawns at us. So an interesting idea is to develop the bishop over here to one of these squares, usually onto b2, and then it's got that nice long diagonal to attack with. And then by never playing h3, A, our kingside pawn structure is better, and B, his attack is much slower. So that's two really nice points right there for us. And so that's something for us to consider with this b3. However, there's some even, I think, more interesting options, and that involves really right around here. Is that the main line, and perhaps the most obvious move, is again that knight f3. Maybe that's the best move. And you know what? Maybe this whole idea that black has with not castling and playing h6 and g5, maybe it's just wrong. Maybe it's unsound. But it gives black exactly what he wants, in which he's going to get that solidish position in the center, and then he's going to throw his pawns at us. And so there's ways to discourage that. One, by playing f4. And then after, well, black is going to go into the center anyway, but then after knight f3, there's a lot more central tension, and it's much harder for black to justify leaving his king in the center and not castling, because the f file, the d file, things are going to open up, and it's not going to be that same position that black's going to get. If we back up, if we look at this sort of main line, where we kind of stopped and looked at all these arrows, one of the problems is that after take, so let's take with the pawn, because it's more thematic. White has this open d file, but notice how everything is defended. There's actually no squares that white can invade on. There's no other files, and it's hard to open up any more lines right away. There's no sacrifices, there's no way to open up more lines, and as long as these e-pawns are here, the king is kind of okay. And the king could even slowly run over to h7, say, and there's nothing immediately happening. And this is kind of the frustrating part of playing white against this opening, is that the center is kind of open, but not really, and there's not a lot we can do. If we back up, by playing with f4, like so, is that we're essentially guaranteeing more lines are going to open up. Either the f file is going to open up, the d file, maybe both, maybe all the center pawns are going to exchange, and this is going to give us more pressure against the king. I'm not saying this is winning or refuting or anything, but it's going to highly discourage black from playing h6, g5. In fact, you can't even play that h6, g5 because our f pawn is controlling that. So right away, this type of position tends to take black away from that type of play. And we can still do all of our normal development. We can put the bishop on e2, we can put it on c4, put the bishop on e3, we can castle, we can put the queen on d2 and castle this one. We can do anything we want as white. Absolutely anything, however you want to play. But the nice thing about this is, again, black doesn't get that thematic attack or the thematic position. He has to do something a little bit different. Maybe not a whole lot of different, but he's got to do something different. He can't just play h6, g5 mindlessly. Which is nice. If we can stop our opponent from doing mindless stuff, we should do it. But then there's also another possibility, which is really interesting as well. I believe this is known as the Shirov Gambit, which is with g4, which is just absolutely wild. And this is where white is basically saying, I don't care for black attacking, I want to attack. In which, of course, the queen actually defends the pawns, everything is fine. And the idea is to simply, well, let's push the pawn, let's push all the pawns. Let's get some absolutely craziness going on. We can imagine, if e5, g5, knight's got to move somewhere. oh crap, all the way back, we can keep the attack going, maybe. Or we can just play e3, queen d2, we castle this way. We've got a very early pawn assault. And again, the advantage of this is that black cannot just do his mindless play. Maybe, you're right, he plays h6, we can keep coming with h4, we're going to play g4, g4 to g5, and again, we're reaching a completely different position, likely different than the one that black wants. Now again, we're not trying to give the impression that black is lost or refuted, or the whole lion setup is bad, or even that the regular knight f3 setup is somehow worse. However, one of the ways that I really approach chess is, well, if we talk about, Kapelinka, Nimzovich, Petrosian, the idea of prophylaxis, stopping your opponent's ideas before they start. If your opponent is playing like this, with this early setup, with this d6, knight f6, and knight d7, there's a high likelihood, especially in a blitz game, that he wants to do this whole black lion setup. Very high, very good likelihood about this. And if that is the case, then not letting him do that, stopping that at the earliest possibility, makes a lot of sense. Get him out of his comfort zone. So this is where some of these sidelines, which aren't even sidelines, they're secondary main lines now, with either g4 or f4, are really, really interesting. There's even other possibilities. We could delay playing knight f3 for something else, like bishop c4. There's the old f3, bishop e3, queen d2, and castle, which is similar to some lines of the Porker Modern. By not playing knight f3, which is the most obvious move, we stop black from doing his really ridiculous plan, which is nonetheless kind of a pain in the butt to face, in my opinion. Again, if you're at all interested in this setup, there is, it's a bit outdated now, but there is a book. Give me 1 second while I find it. Okay, so here it is. This is the original book that launched it back 2009, so about 10 years ago. It is 10 years ago. The Black Line, again, by these Dutch authors. It's a little bit outdated, but it does explain the ideas very well, so that's there's that. More recently, Simon Williams has created both a free YouTube video series on that. Again, if you just type in Simon Williams or Ginger GM Black Line, you'll get all the free resources. And then on ChessBase, he has a DVD as well, which goes into detail with modern games and his games. He plays what he teaches. He plays what he preaches. So those are extra resources if you're really interested in learning about this from the black side. He also goes into how to counter some of those setups that we had as white. That said, if you are white in this position, I would recommend either looking at these sidelines with f4 or g4, which you need to go into more detail than what I gave here. If you look at a couple of games from Shirov, say, you will find this will often take black out of his immediate comfort zone. Or, if this is just too wild and crazy for you, which is perfectly fine, I would suggest not playing with this h3, but tending with more of this b3, putting the bishop on the line diagonal here. And then, again, it's really simple. We can put our rooks on the center files. We can try and invade this way. And again, black's attack, if he's going to try with h6 and g5, is much slower and much less powerful, much less scary. He doesn't have the immediate assault going. And if he still tries to play with... Okay, let's not do that. Okay. It's so hard. Still tries to play this attack, it's much more likely it's going to be weaknesses in the late middle game and end game, and then you'll be laughing to the bank. That said, I really want to just highlight this because the more, especially if you're playing faster time control, especially on the internet, you're going to run into people that play this. And there will be people who play this against everything. I've seen people, it's kind of funny, against things like the English. You're thinking, what the heck is going on? Like, is black even sane at this point? But then he's eventually going to get this e5, and then knight f6, and let me just put some e7, h6, and we can see that black has this exact same setup, and he's going to play this no matter what with h6. You can't go to knight g4, but he's going to get those pawns starting to roll at you. And so this is also why, especially at faster time controls, if we can do something that can discourage black from playing such automatic moves every single time, well, maybe we should explore that. And so again, in a position like this, maybe delaying knight f3 for f4 or g4, or developing our bishop over here by not playing h3. This would be roughly how I approach this position. If you want to see more, there's the book, The Black Lion, and or Simon Williams on the Black Line would be very interesting and useful as well. Other than that, that's it. So again, you can check my blog for SmithyQ.com. It's going to have this whole PGN and some commentary on that, so you can find that. It'll also have links to absolutely everything. So check that out at SmithyQ.com. Otherwise, that's that, and I'll have another, the next opening will be coming up soon in the survey. So thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening.